Hello everyone, this is Leslie Pelch at the Vermont Center for Geographic Information. I would like to welcome you to our webinar today, which is called QGIS Layer Properties. We're going to start out with this slide that you hopefully see in front of you, which is how to participate today, and it is my attempt to just do a brief overview of how this all works for anybody that hasn't done one before or hasn't done a GoToWebinar style of webinar before. So I'm just going to very quickly go over how this will work and ask you to do a little clicking for me. So the first thing is that you have a panel. I assume it's on the right of your screen as it is on mine, and you can open and close your panel by clicking on this little orange button with an arrow on it to kind of get it out of your way or make it come back if it goes away on its own. If you have any audio issues, you should go into your the audio part of your panel and see if you need to change anything in audio mode. You can also click on audio setup for additional settings and things that you can change to try to make things work. You are all muted, and so if you have questions for me, you can type them into the little questions box, and that will go to me, and you can do it at any time. It won't interrupt me. I'll just sort of look at them as I have a chance. I'll probably save most of the questions till the end unless it seems like a particularly relevant one to the moment of what we're doing in that moment. And then the final thing I want to point out is that you have a little button that looks like an orange hand with a green arrow on it. And if you could all click on that button at this time, that's the raising your hand button. And that lets me know that you can hear me. Great. And you can also use it as a way to get my attention, but to be honest, the better way probably is just to send me a question in the question box. Anything else? Oh, so this is being recorded. This webinar is being recorded right now, and I will post it at the BCGI website. So if you're not able to stay for the whole thing, or if you want to point someone else towards it if you think it's of value, it will be posted at the BCGI website. And let me just go there to show you where. So here's our website. If you go to the Community Resources section, or actually the Events part of the Community Resources section, there's a link over here to Events as well. And then if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see the Event Archive, and there's a link there, and that's where we've got webinars posted. So I should get around to posting this sometime next week, and I'll also warn you that our website is going to be changing radically in the next week or two, but the archived webinars will still be posted in the same place. It'll all look different, but we'll still have an event archive within our events section of the website. So what we're going to do today is use QGIS, Quantum GIS. Now, for anyone who hasn't participated in either one of my previous intro to quantum type of webinars that just very briefly introduced it and how to use it, or who hasn't tried it themselves, I have to warn you, this isn't the very first one, so I'm not starting absolutely from 100%, no experience, or in terms of my assumptions about all of you, but we're also doing pretty basic things here. So although I apologize if you feel like you needed just a little bit more ramp up to get into this, that's not quite where we're starting with this webinar. So you can feel free to send me questions later about anything that I don't cover at the beginning of this that you wish I had. I think you'll be able to follow along just fine because it's pretty straightforward. So Quantum is a free and open source, and actually let me go back to the website briefly, free and open source software that you can get by just going to qgis.org. So free means free, doesn't cost anything. Open source means that the source code that is used to make this software is available to anyone. So if you happen to be someone who works with computer code, you can actually download the code, you can mess with it, you can participate in this community and suggest ways to improve the software. So here's the page. I just wanted to point out that it's easy to get, it's free. If you have any familiarity with GIS software, ArcGIS, or in pretty much any other GIS software that's real GIS software, it looks pretty similar to most of those software packages. There's a blank panel over on the left that says layers up at the top. There's a blank panel over on the right where you might guess that a map is eventually going to appear. There's a little north arrow down there. And so today what we're going to focus on is bringing some data in here, making a simple map, and then seeing what we can do to make it look a little better, like, you know, not just accepting the default colors and settings when we pull it in, but working a little bit on symbology and different things you can do with symbology, and then also adding labels. And if we have time, we will talk about scale dependency as that relates to labels, and also just whether data layers appear at all. So that's what we're going to do today. So I'm going to close up my panel for now. I will open it every so often to see if people have sent me questions. I don't see any yet. So, and like I said, I'm probably going to save most of the questions till the end unless they point out something that I really should have said. So the first thing we're going to do is add data. And again, I'm sort of skipping over the part where you actually get data, which you can do at our website. We do have a webinar posted in the archive, the event archive, that I believe is the intro to the VCGI, or a tour of the VCGI website that actually spends a fair amount of time on downloading data from the VCGI website. So if you haven't done it before, you could go look for that webinar and try that out. Or again, you can just contact me afterwards and I can explain how to get data. But today we are just going to access data that is on my computer. So notice that these little symbols up here where my cursor is circling are a variety of different ways to bring data into the project. And I just want to point out that if you hover over any of these little tools and buttons, it does sort of say what it is, what it does. So we're just going to add some vector data. We're going to ignore all this stuff up here and just go down to Browse. So now it's looking around, and I'm going to go, I'm actually already there, but so I know that I have data in this folder on my C drive. And first thing I'm going to add, actually I'm going to add all three at once. I'm going to add town boundaries and two transportation layers, airports. So I'm going to hold down my control key because that's going to allow me to select more than one thing. So airports and major roads. So all I did was hold down my control key as I clicked on these three these three shape files. One polygon shape file, 1 point, 1 line. And then I just click on open. And you can see that the default symbology is not particularly pleasing to the eye. Not that I am either a cartographer or particularly good with color, but even I can see that this does not work that well as a map. So the first thing we're going to do is change how the airports look. So again, we've got our three data layers listed over on the left. Notice, well, actually you can't really notice it that well with these three data layers. We'll see this in a minute, but the order that the data layers appear here does matter. The software is essentially drawing from the bottom up. So if town boundaries is on the bottom, it is indeed drawn underneath. And let me just demonstrate that by moving it. So now we can't see the other two data layers because it's actually drawing the town boundaries, which is a solid polygon layer on top of the other two. And notice we can move those around easily to change the order. And they're all showing because they have an X in the little box. We can visually turn them on and off by just clicking on that X to make it go away or come back. So the first thing we're going to do is change the symbology of the airports layer. First I have to just do a simple left click on it to highlight it so that it's obviously the chosen layer. And then I do a right click to get this context menu. A bunch of things here, but what we're going to do is go down to properties. All right, so I'm just going to do that one more time so everybody sees that. I've already left clicked on this data layer so that it's highlighted with the blue, and then I right click. Notice that I'm putting my cursor on the name of the data layer, not on the symbol or the X, but on the actual name of the data layer. Right click to get this context menu, and then choose properties to open up the layer properties dialog box. So you can see that this is a point data layer, so our options for how we symbolize it are obviously going to be limited to what we can do with a point. We've got some options, not very many, but a few options down here. The first thing we look at actually is right up in the upper left corner. If we click on this little drop-down arrow, we see the options for I can't think what the word is for this, but the basic style of what we're doing. Do we want to have one single symbol for all of the features in this data layer, which is obviously single symbol? Do we want to categorize the symbology, which means there will be a different symbol or color or something for each feature depending on a category, which has to do with using the attribute data, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then graduated, most of you are probably familiar with graduated symbology, where it might be the size of a symbol or it might be the color that changes, again, depending on the values of an attribute within the data. We'll get into that later. We're going to start out just with the single symbol. So we just want to change the symbology for all the features in this airport's data layer. So the first thing we're going to do is change it to a star by clicking on the star. This happens to be a huge default size, so we're going to change that down a little bit. So here's the size of the symbol. This is showing us what the symbol is going to look like. Notice that you have a little slider that controls transparency. We're going to leave that 0 because we want it to be opaque. If we wanted to, we could change the color by clicking on the little button that has, this is the color swatch, and it says change, so we click on it to change it. I'm actually going to leave it red for now, but if we wanted to, we could change it to a different color. And notice we have a bunch of different ways to come up with a color. There's little swatches. We can click on in this prism-y thing over here. We can actually set values in here. But for now, we're just going to leave it red. And okay, that's all we're going to do for now. Oh, and I forgot to point something out, but we will do it with the roads. So now we have nice red stars. And actually, I'm going to move the stars, the airports on top of the roads, just so they draw on top. And now we're going to change the roads data layer in a similar way. Right click, properties. I'm going to first change the color, and I'm going to pick a gray by actually choosing black up in the basic colors area, and then using this little slider on the right. You can see that that does like the saturation value, I think is how you describe that. And so we can pick a gray and then say OK. Notice that you've got a few different symbol options down here. I haven't gotten into, in the new symbology dialog, I haven't gotten into where you get more. I think you click on Style Manager and see if you have more options. The width, the thickness of the line is determined over here. I'm going to make it just a little bit thicker. And we're going to leave the transparency, so I think that's all I'm going to do. Oh, so down at the bottom, when I'm done, I can just click Apply. And notice that what that does is it actually changes the symbology so I can see how it looks, but it doesn't close the dialog box. So if I would just want to try some things out, like, well, maybe that's actually too thick. Maybe we'll tone it down a little bit and then click Apply again. Or maybe I'll go back to 0.3. And then once I'm done, I can close that by clicking Apply. Okay. And finally, we're going to change our town boundaries layer, this lovely, whatever color this is, to something else. We're leaving it single symbol. All three of these we've left single symbol because we're applying the same change to all the features. Mostly I want to change the color. And this time I'm going to take advantage of the RGB option all the way over on the right, and I'm going to plug in some numbers here. And I only know to plug these in because someone told me once, so it's not something you would automatically know. But if you happen to find a color you really like, you can actually notice what the values are and save that information and plug it in whenever you want to. Okay, so I've changed it to a pleasant, calm yellow. And we're just going to click OK. There. So now we have a map that's, it's not beautiful, but it's a little bit easier to read. I might actually make these roads just a little bit darker so we can see them better. Okay. So the purpose here obviously is to show the roads but not have them be the most prominent feature on the map. So they're there maybe to orient us, but not to be the primary thing. The airports are what stand out. And again, I could make the airports a little bit smaller. Maybe they're a little bit too big. But this achieves my goal, a fairly simple map that shows town boundaries and roads to orient us, and the red stars to show us where the airports are. So the next thing we're going to explore is how to do slightly more complicated symbology. So instead of applying the same symbology to all the features in the layer, we are going to go into the properties for the airports, and we're going to choose categorized. And notice that this immediately changes. As soon as you switch to categorized, our options are changing. The very first thing we want to set is the column, which really means what's the attribute that you want the software to look at when figuring out what symbology to apply, how to differentiate between the different features. And so what we're looking at here are the names of the attributes in the attribute table. Let me just go back one step. Very, very briefly, just for anybody who's not that familiar with GIS data. I'm going to open the attribute table. My very quick description of GIS data, it includes the geometry and locational information, which is kind of what you see right now on the map. It's showing us where stuff is in relation to each other. But remember that GIS data also consists of the attribute data. So there's this tabular data where each of the features on the map is associated with a a row of information in this table. So if I click on these things to highlight them, you'll see that it highlights different features on the map. So take a look at these column headings. These are the names of the attributes. These are the values of the attributes. All right, so each data layer has an attribute table like this associated with it. So we're going to take advantage of that in our symbolizing of the data by saying we want to categorize it, and the attribute we want to look at is called, and just notice for a second that these are the same column headings that we just saw, but we're going to choose one that is rather mysteriously called miscellaneous. This is also a good lesson in what not to name your attributes, because miscellaneous is not a good name for an attribute. Let's see, our symbol, we'll go back to star. Notice that when we click on the symbol selector, we get some of our transparency is also in here. That's going to be important in a second. Now, one of the things I don't like that much about this newer version of Quantum and the way its symbology interface works is that we don't have a lot of options in here in the color ramp. But it doesn't matter that much because we can just pick one. And notice that nothing seems to have happened yet. We're not seeing what our different values, what the result of that is. We actually have to click on the Classify button once we have picked all this other stuff. The column, which tells it which attribute to look at, the symbol, the colors, and now we can click Classify. So these are the values that it found in this miscellaneous attribute. And you can see that the values are actually pretty important. It's basically ownership of the airport, municipal, private, or state. And although we have this not very useful blue color ramp right now assigning the colors, we can actually just double click on each of these symbols to set it to whatever color we want, or whatever symbol for that matter. So since we only have 3 values here, I'm just going to change the values. Actually, I'm going to leave that one. I'm going to change the colors to blue, red, and green. And again, my only point here is to distinguish these 3 different values so they're very easy to see and recognize on the map. You notice that there's a 4th symbol here. This is created by default just in case any of the features don't have a value in that particular attribute column. If you know that that's not an issue, that they all have a value, then it doesn't really matter what this is. If, on the other hand, you don't want these attributes to show, if they don't have a value and you don't even want it to show on the map, well, now I'm saying this as we can make it transparent. There, we can make it go away. So at least visually it won't show up. All right, so I've got 3 things here. Let's see what happens. So there we go. Oh, and I still have one of my, let's just, deselect. No. Oh, why won't it let me unselect? Well, I've got one selected. I can't unselect. Where's my, there we go. There, sorry. So I unselected the thing that I had selected by clicking on this little button up here. All right, so there we are. We've got the airports very quickly and easily. We can figure out which are municipal, which are private, which are state. Now we're going to add a little bit more information to the map. We're going to add some county boundaries. They're located in the same place. So just go back into this folder, add them in here. Notice, of course, the first thing that happens is they draw right on top of everything else, which we don't want. We're going to put them down here just above the town boundaries. And then we're going to change the symbology. We're going to use the categorized option. We're going to, county, CNTY, is an attribute that just has a number code. So we're going to choose county name just because that way when it shows up on our legend over here on the left, we'll be able to know what each county name is. All right, once again, we just have a color, we have a ramp. Now, in this case, I really want to do more of a, let's just see what this, oh, there we go. Oh, that's nice. Sorry, as usual, I didn't try this before I, let's see if we can do another one. Oh, it looks pretty similar, but that's all right. All right, so we just created a random color ramp, and then we added in here. Oh. So the first thing, I don't find that the random color ramp is all that helpful, is that, so we've got things that are the same color. Let's just see how it works, though. In order to achieve the effect that I want to achieve here, I need to click on the symbol button in order to get at the transparency option, because what I want to do is give each county a different color, but also have it be mostly transparent, somewhere around 85%. Oh, and I have to, sorry, I forgot I needed to do that first. So I'm going to delete this and reclassify it. And you can see that what that does, obviously, is it makes it mostly transparent, but it still gives it some color. So now we're going to see how that looks. And as you can see, the problem is that too many of the colors are the same. And so we want to change the ones that are, let's do Windsor, or sorry, orange. Oh, so once you've done this, again, you can still go in and change colors individually, and it still retains the transparency, which is helpful. Where else do we need to, oops. So you can see that helps a little bit with distinguishing things. We need to do Lamoille County. Let me do that yellow. All right. What other one we need to do? Well, like they've all been assigned gray. Okay, it's a little bit better. Too many putty colors here, I would say. All right, how about we do Windsor County? Or sorry, yeah, Windsor. That's enough for now. So, well, maybe I'll just do Franklin. Franklin's bugging me. What color should we make Franklin? Orange. Okay, so you can see that my goal here is simply to make the colors distinguishable, but not actually have them be opaque and cover up the town boundaries underneath. Another option would be to make the town boundaries hollow and on top, but this actually works out a little bit easier. And remember that your order matters, because you want to make sure that your roads and your airports are on top of the counties so that you can see everything as well as possible. All right, so let me just check if there are any desperate questions yet. Okay. Okay. All right, now we are going to work on graduated symbols. Let me just, yes. All right, so that's all we want to do with this map. So basically we've just figured out where we go in to change symbology, which is right-click on the name of the data layer, go into properties. Oh, and something I forgot to point out is that when you first go into layer properties, there's actually a bunch of tabs up here. So if you're not in the right one initially, make sure that you click on the one that says Style, which is all the way over on the left. And notice that you could actually potentially not see it because there are enough tabs here that you might have to scroll a bit. I should also point out that I am using version, I believe it's 1.74, which is not the most recent version, because when I tried to, late last year, I downloaded the 1.8 version, and something in it did not work for me, and I am totally blanking now what it was, but I went back to the 1.74 version. So I apologize that it's not the absolute most recent version that I'm demonstrating, but it's not that different. And I can't remember what it was that didn't work in the 1.8 version. Okay, so remember to go into the Style tab if you're not in there by default. And you can check out all the other tabs to see what your options are. Okay, all right, so let's move on now to thinking about graduated symbols. We're actually going to open an existing project. So remember what I did at the beginning here is I started with a blank project, nothing, so it's like opening Microsoft Word and not having a document and adding stuff to it to create the document. If this was a project or a map that I wanted to save, I would go up to the Save button, and I would say Save Project, and I would save it somewhere. And it would save all the information about what data I included in this project, where it was located, because remember I had to navigate to it to add it. It's also going to save all the symbology information. So the next time I open it up, it'll look exactly the way it looks right now. But it's important to remember that when you create a map project, whether it's in QGIS or ArcGIS, what you're saving, you're not saving copies of the data in that project. You're just saving references to where the data was when this was created, so that when you open it up again, it'll go look for the data in that same spot. If you've moved the data in the meantime or gotten rid of the data, it won't work, and it'll give you little unhappy exclamation points or question marks or something over here next to the name of the data layer, because it won't be able to find it. Today I don't need to save this, so I'm not going to. I'm just going to click on this blue folder, which is the Open Project button, and I'm going to open up a new project. I think I have a question, so let me just see if I should look at it. Oh, I am not going to add an ortho, well, can I? So my question is whether I could add an ortho photo. I'll point out that the way you add an ortho photo is simply to use the little button right next to the Add Vector Data that says, or at least it should say, Add Raster Layer. And it goes directly to wherever. Oh, look, the last time I did this, I did. Let's see if I have any in here. I can't remember if I have any orthos in here. Oh, you know what I do? see if this works. If this doesn't work, I'm just going to drop it because I wasn't going to do this. So let me just, okay, there we go. All right, so I just added an orthophoto, which again I had saved on my computer. So I just had, it's an orthophoto that I had downloaded, saved onto my computer, and I click on the add raster layer. I just navigate to where I know it's saved and add it in here. And you may have noticed that that orthophoto, which is this one, and notice all these little numbers are the same on these three files. They're kind of all part of this one orthophoto, but the one that I actually want to add is the JP2 because that's the visual file. It automatically kind of links to the other files, brings in the geographic reference information that allows it to be put on the map in the right place. But when you bring that image in, you want to click on the image file. So there's an orthophoto, which we'll turn back off now. Okay, so I am going to open a different project. I'm going to discard this current project, and I'm going to open one that's, you'll notice it's going kind of to a place I just went earlier, but when I was practicing beforehand. So there's an unpleasant looking map with two simple data layers on it. So the first thing we're going to do is go into the symbology for the demo town pop n underscore poly. And you'll see what this data layer is in just a second. And we're going to go back to new symbology. And you notice there's this old symbology, new symbology. I don't know why they did this when they changed the symbology. They let you pick what you want to work with. I'm trying to stick with the new symbology as much as possible so that if the old symbology goes away, I won't cry. But I think I might actually go to the new symbology at some point. Okay, so we're going to, so we've got this demo town pop n data. We're going to switch from single symbol to graduated now. And we're going to see what sorts of options we have. Now, I'm not sure if all of you are going to be able to figure this out, but if you take a look at the names of these attributes, you might see a pattern, for one thing. And then if you think about the names of some of these, you might figure out that what this, most of this data is census data. And I haven't updated this file in a long time, so it still has the 2000 census data as the most recent. So pop n 2000 is population, the population by town in Vermont in the year 2000, according to the census. And so we've told it we want to do graduate, we've told it which attribute we want it to look at. The other things that we need to do, so this symbol is where we would access things like transparency, but we don't need to change any of that. Notice we can choose our color ramp. Blue is fine. And in this case, think about the fact, well, we'll choose blue, and then we can talk about why a color ramp that goes from more to less intense does make sense in this case. We have to set the number of classes, although by default it's 5, and we're probably going to leave it there, but notice that you can change that. Mode is important. Equal interval and quantile and natural breaks are the three that I'm familiar with. Standard deviation, I know what that means, but I'm not sure exactly what that translates to in doing this graduated symbolization. And pretty breaks, I also am not familiar with what that is. Let's try equal interval and quantile, and then we can talk briefly about what the difference is, although it's a little bit hard to see on here because it doesn't give you some information. I'm going to start with quantile. And again, once I've set all these things, I then still need to click the classify button in order to make something happen. So remember, the value that we're asking it to look at is population. So that's what these numbers represent. And this is telling us the range of population values that are going to be symbolized with this color in our ramp. And this is the label that will be given. And the reason this is given is because you can actually change the label if you want to. In this case, I'm not sure you would want to, but by double-clicking, I can actually delete or or type something else in there for the label. So in this case, we're first, our first category is 0 to 587. The next one's 587 to 1046. There we go. Next one is 1046 to 1603. And you'll notice that in these higher categories, they're going up by a lot more. So the first few categories are only changing by about 500, 5 to 600. And these upper categories, all of a sudden, the range goes from 1600 to 3200, and then the final category is 3200 to 39,000, which, if you're familiar with the populations in Vermont, you'll know that the 39,824 was the population of Burlington in 2000. So, how are these breaks being determined? If we had one more category here, one more column rather, showing us how many features fit into each of these categories, we would see that what Quantile does is it takes all of the towns, looks at all of their values, kind of lines them up in order, this is how I think of it, and breaks them into equal numbers, chunks of towns. So a certain number, however many towns there are, 255 divided by 5. The first chunk from 0 to 587 is a certain number of towns. That those all just sort of go in that. That's actually what determined what that range would be, is what is the range covered by the first chunk of towns. The next chunk of towns, which is the same number of towns, goes into the second one. So all it did was take all the towns, divide them up into 5 categories, and put the chunk that had the lowest population in the lowest category, the chunk that had the highest population in the highest category. So that's how this is getting divided up. And let's just apply that to see how it looks. What that means is there's going to be, again, an equal number of towns in each of these categories, which is why you end up with the top category having such a huge range. So all the towns that are between 3,200 and 39,000 in population are in that same light blue category. The equal interval option, on the other hand, oh, actually, let's just start over. There we go. The equal interval category takes the same information, the same data, and instead of breaking it up evenly by the number of towns in each category, it actually breaks it up by the population. So it takes the total range in population from 0 up to 39,000, divides that up into equal chunks. So you can see that each category is adding another 7,964.8 to the range. And then it just sees where the towns fall in those categories. So if we do that, what we find is that, not surprisingly, most of the towns fit within this very first category, 0 to 7,964. So it doesn't distinguish a lot between the towns. Whereas the few towns that fit into these other categories get slightly different colors. So it's an interesting question. What is the better way to represent this spread? By doing quantile, you get sort of a prettier map that distinguishes things a little bit more, but it's a little bit misleading in the sense that it's lumping together towns with very different populations. All right, sorry, went off a little bit on that. Okay. All right, so now we can add some labels to our map. And we're going to add county names. So we're going to go into the Properties window for county boundaries. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, we're not doing this. We're not going into the properties. We can. Actually, let me just point out the fact that there is a labels option in here. So there are 2 different ways to do labels in Quantum, and one of the things I don't quite understand about how they have set this up is that you can do it here, Or you can do it by clicking on this little button up here. And each of them independently adds labels. So you could do both and have two different ways of adding the labels. Or I should say you'd be adding labels twice. So you kind of have to pick which you're going to use. It's not two different ways to access the same thing, even though the options are the same. So I don't think I explained that very well, but I would just say pick one. Either use the button up here to do labeling or use the properties box. And today I'm going to use the button just because we've been in the properties box a lot. So by using the button, that's all you're looking at is labels. First thing is that you need to click on label this layer. Otherwise, everything you set in here doesn't happen. I'm going to turn this off for a second. Field with labels is obviously important. That's how you're determining what attribute, again, the software is going to look at in order to pull it out and apply it as the label. Don't have a lot of options here. The CNTY is just that number code. So we obviously do want county name. You've got options in terms of color, size. Buffer, you'll see, just creates a little halo behind the text, which actually makes it a lot easier to read. And that's all we're going to worry about for now, and I'm actually going to leave all of these in their default. But you can see that you click on the color swatch just like before, you get the same color selector. So if you have a special color you want to pick, or if you want to make it a color instead of black, this is just going to change what you're measuring the size of it in. And I'm just going to go ahead and say OK. And there we've got some county labels. So another thing we could do, since we've got the county labels on there, we might as well show the county boundaries, which right now we're just covering up the counties with the town population data. So if I drag the county layer up above, and the way that I'm dragging is when I left click and then hold my left button down as I drag the data layer. So that's how we drag. So now I've put it on top and now it's just covering it up. So we need to change the symbology in order to make this work. This is where I went back to the old symbology. So as you can see, the new symbology button is here, which means we're in old symbology. And the reason is that for some reason in new symbology, I have not been able to figure out, maybe this is where it is. Oh, this is. Never mind. I'm going to use the new symbology. I had not been able to figure out how I could change the border of a polygon so that separately from the color, the fill. But this is where. So I can make the fill style. Oh, well, maybe I can't. Maybe I can't do it in here. I was hoping that I could make this, the fill style, empty. Or maybe no brush. There we go. All right. So by changing it to no brush, what I'm doing is making it hollow, I'm hoping. Border color, I'm going to change to yellow, bright yellow. You can see you can do solid or dashed width. I think I want to raise that just a little bit. No, maybe not. Let's try that. There, that's not too bad. That's pretty much what I was going for. Okay, so just to reiterate, I had thought I needed to go back to old symbology to achieve this, but I do not. In order to change your polygon symbology so that it is hollow on the inside and only the border is a color, or if you want to change your border color, even if it is solid, you click on the change button to get in there. There's more symbol properties. All right, so there's my outline. Okay. I think I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about scale dependency, because one of the kind of neat things about using GIS software, not so much to create the paper map as to create a digital map interface that you can interact with to access information is that you can put these labels on, but you can also change their settings so that they only show up at certain scales. That's what scale dependency refers to. So I will just show you that if we zoom in on the map, we still get the county label, which isn't really that interesting or useful when we're zoomed in this far. Zoom back out. And, if you think about it, when you're zoomed out at this scale, you'd probably want to see those county labels. When you're zoomed into more of a town scale, you're probably going to want to see, or a few towns, you probably would rather see town labels because you're usually within a county at that point. Or you might be on the edge, but you'll see the border. So what we're going to do is set the county boundary labels. So I'm going to highlight county boundaries, click on my label button again, and go in here and turn on scale-based visibility. We're going to set the minimum value to 350,000, and the maximum can be, should just be sort of as big as it can be. How many zeros do I have there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I need to. All right, so nothing changed, right? We're still looking at, but now if we zoom in and take a look down in our bottom of our screen, down here it actually says scale, and it expresses it as a relative fraction. Let's try typing in. All right, so if I type in 350,000, we're now at a scale of 1 to 350,000, and our labels show. If I change it to 349,000, I've now zoomed. Which direction am I going? I'm going lower number out. I've zoomed out just a little bit. No, I've zoomed in just a little bit, and it no longer shows. So if we're out beyond the 350,000, we see it, and if we're in farther than that, we don't. Okay. Now we're going to add some labels for the towns. So now notice that what I did was I made sure to highlight the label, the data layer that I want to use to label. And then I click on the label thing. Then I do label this layer. And now we're going to have the scale-based visibility be a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 350,000. Remember last time we had our minimum at 350,000. Town name looks right. Size and color all looks fine. All right, so again, we're now zoomed out beyond 1 to 350,000, which means we don't see those town labels. If you check out my scale down here, I've just set it to 350. Oh. Oh, it's not working. That's interesting. Was I not typing enough numbers? 350. Oh, I was going the wrong direction, wasn't I? Sorry. 349. Oh. Right. All right, so 1 to 350,000, we are out far enough that we don't see the town at 349,999. That's where it switches. Okay. Sorry. So that's how we can set the labels to be scale dependent. And again, if we just zoom all the way back out, we get this. If we use our zoom in tool to just kind of zoom in to look at a couple of towns, we automatically get the town labels. Now we can do the same thing as far as scale dependency with whole data layers. So I'm just going to quickly add a roads data layer. and change the symbology so we can see it. See if that works. Yeah. Okay, so there's the roads. We're going to go into the properties for that roads data layer. And this time, instead of changing symbology, we're going to go into the General tab. There's a bunch of stuff in here. The thing that we care about right now is use scale-dependent rendering. So this is the actual rendering of the data layer. We're going to type 350000 in the maximum, and the minimum is still going to be 0. So again, we're sort of applying the same scale dependency as we did for the town labels, town boundary labels. So it disappears. Let's zoom in. Typing in 300,000 down here at the bottom, and there's the roads. And we should see 349,999. The roads show 350000. They go away. Maybe, maybe not. Well, for some reason, the edge of this one is on the other side of 350,000. Okay, so there's scale dependency with an actual data layer, with the rendering of the data layer. Okay, I think that's all I need to cover today. So I'm going to see if you guys have any questions. So this is your opportunity to go ahead and compose a question. I do have one here about adding a legend. So one of the things that we're not covering today that we are going to cover in a future webinar, that's the other thing I should have mentioned, is that I'm planning to do several more webinars on using quantum. A bunch of them are scheduled already. If you look at our events calendar, there might be 1 or 2 more that I haven't scheduled yet. I can't remember right at the moment. And the reason I mention that is because creating actual map layouts is a separate subject that we'll go into in another webinar. So generally speaking, when you're going to print out a map, you don't actually just take what you have on the screen here and print it out. This is your map view. And if you were going to create a map to be printed out or published in some way, you'd create a layout view, and that's a whole series of steps. However, I think that we can actually, no. Why is this not? Oh, it's because, no, that's the attribute table. I do remember that there was something, no, maybe it was just about the north arrow. There's a north arrow, and you can also add a scale bar. In the map view, but I haven't done that recently. Let me just check. No, it's not in here. So yeah, I guess I'll go back to what I was saying, which is that generally speaking, you add a table of contents in the map, the layout view, which you get by clicking on these print composers up here. So we will cover that in a future one. In a sense, this is our legend. Our table of contents is kind of our legend in terms of our working map, just so that we're seeing what the symbology of things are. But if we were going to be creating a map to print out, we would create a layout. So there's my long answer. Yeah, Composer Manager. So I wasn't going to cover that in this one, but if we don't have any more questions, I can dip into that. Let me just see if there's any more questions today. All right, well, since nobody else has sent me a question, I will go ahead and do the Composer Manager. So again, this is what I call layout view because in ArcGIS, that's what it's called generally. They call it the Composer. So you can see that it opens up a separate window, and this is our layout over here. Again, I didn't prepare for this today, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I haven't prepared my head for it. But the quick, there we go. there are a bunch of different ways to add stuff. There's all these nice little buttons up here that are graphic, and you hold your cursor over them and they tell you what they do. So like adding a legend. You can also add things by clicking on layout. So you'll notice first off that we don't have a map on here, so we should add our map. Once you click on that, nothing actually happens, so you have to draw a box in order to bring your map in. And now if I want to add the legend, I would click on this button and click on the map, and it kind of does the legend by default. Now, the important thing to keep in mind in the composer is that this panel over on the right of the composer, what it offers you and what you can change is entirely determined by what you have clicked on over on the left in the actual layout. So right now I've got the map clicked on. Right now I have the legend, and obviously you can tell which is chosen by which has the little boxes in the corner. So since I have the legend chosen here, I can change all sorts of things about the legend in this panel on the right. If I click on item, that's really the one that is about the legend. I guess I should have pointed that out. The item tab is the one that has the settings that we can change in the legend. Notice that when you're in that tab, there's some things down at the bottom. So there's the tab, but then within the tab there are actually sections. We're in the general section of the tab, the item tab. Now we're in the legend items section of the item tab. And now we're in the item options section of the item tab. It's a little bit visually hard to see all this, so that's part of the reason I don't want to spend too much time on this, because we don't really have enough to do it justice, but we will do it in a future webinar. But you do have a lot of control over how the legend looks and how everything in this layout looks. Once we add everything in, it's just a matter of kind of becoming familiar with how to access it all over in this right panel. All right, I think that's all I'm going to say about the legend and the Composer Manager. So if there's no more questions, I think I'm going to wrap it up and say thank you very much for joining me. I hope it was useful. You are going to get a link to, I think when you sign out, you'll be given a little survey. I'd really appreciate it if you take just a second to fill out the survey and give me feedback. Maybe the final thing I'll show you is my contact information, because if anyone does have questions about either accessing data or quantum in general, I suppose. I don't have very deep knowledge with quantum, but I'm happy to try to answer questions. Here's my, I guess my whole picture and everything. Here's my email and my phone number if you want to note those down, if you want to contact me afterwards. And thank you very much, and keep an eye open for the other, or check the event calendar. Let's show you that. There we go. So the future ones that are already scheduled are understanding using attribute data, data acquisition, and yeah, the one that I haven't posted yet, that I haven't scheduled yet, is the one about layouts. So that'll be the final one. So I think that's it. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good day.